Let's speak first this morning to Charlie Downs, 23-year-old political writer, commentator and strategist. Charlie, very good morning to you. Remoralisation in schools, is that really high on the list of what young people in this country need? Morning.
Well, I think that you listed a few things that are leading to young people feeling pretty dispossessed, pretty dissatisfied, and wanting to leave the UK, like the exploding cost of housing, the lack of rewarding, dignified, well-paid work, the deindustrialisation that we're seeing across the nation. But I don't see why it can't be that. And also this loss of national identity, because certainly for my entire life, I've been sold the idea that Britain is first and foremost a set of values, things like democracy and tolerance and the rule of law and all of these sorts of things that are actually enshrined in law and taught in the education system and have been since 2015. We've been taught that Britain is something like a propositional nation like the United States. And we're finding, I think, that there isn't really much of a sense of identity to be found in that, because if your national identity is basically, a fashionable corporate slogan that could be taught off of a PowerPoint, that's pretty thin gruel, right? And so we have been sold this idea that identity is to be found in things like careerism, consumerism, the pursuit of credentials at university, and also things like sexuality and race and gender and all the rest of it. And so I think what Reform are saying about remoralising young people by reintroducing the idea of the nation being where people get their identity from, I think is a great idea, because if you look at the entirety of human history, basically, that is where people had their sense of belonging. It wasn't through these abstract ideas of progress, it was through their people.
But this is a problem that doesn't exist, Charlie, isn't it? I mean, Reform, you heard Zia Yusuf there coming out and saying that children are being taught that they should hate their country. I mean, name me a school where children are being taught that they should hate this country.
Well, I can tell you anecdotally from my own educational experience that through primary school and secondary school, the historical education that we received was pretty minimal. And it basically covered Henry VIII and it covered World War II. That's my prevailing memory.
Yep.
And the way that was taught was that Henry VIII was an embodiment of pre-World War II Britain, a kind of tyrannical mad king who was, killing everyone, killing all his wives and all the rest of it. And then when World War II happened, modern Britain is born. Sorry, Ben?
That's all true. I mean, he did kill 3 of his wives.
But Henry VIII is an extreme example of a bad king, when actually there have been many more good kings throughout British history, like Alfred the Great, for example.
I mean, this is with respect, this is flimsy stuff.
Well, okay, I'll give you a stronger example.
But no, hold on. We cannot say that because children are learning in schools about Henry VIII, that's on par with, as Zia Yusuf puts it, being taught they should hate their country.
But it's the way in which it's framed. It's framed as though Britain for thousands of years was a backwards mental nation where there was no freedom, no belonging, no prosperity and all the rest of it. And only when World War II comes and liberalism. Sorry, Ben, say that again.
It's a while ago. I appreciate it, Charlie, but that's not what I was taught in school at all.
I'm telling you that it was what I was taught. And I can tell you as well that when I was at university, I was a professor said to me in a free speech seminar of all things that those hanging the English flag off of their wall were probably a racist. And I had my flag on the wall at the time, as you can see behind me. I mean, it's a Union flag today, but it was an English flag at the time. And so, there is certainly a consensus among educational and academic elites that this country is not something to be proud of, and that national pride is something dangerous and something to be avoided.
I'm not sure that's true, Charlie. But what you think teachers in this country generally hate the country they live in and serve?
Hate is a strong word, but I think that there is a certain...
That's Zia Yusuf's word. They've been taught they should hate this country.
He's welcome. I mean, I don't speak for the party. I wouldn't say, I think it's strong language to say that teachers hate this country. But I do think that the educational system and the culture more generally, the kind of moral paradigm that we've lived in, has seen things like national pride as being something dangerous and something to be tamped down and avoided. But actually what they are is the source of belonging and identity that people have drawn nourishment from for thousands of years.
I would agree that a sense of patriotism in moderation to an extent, and as long as it's based in fact, is a good thing. How do you teach that, though, Charlie?
Well, I think that there has to be an understanding that there is no such thing as a neutral institution. Also, all institutions have a political perspective. And the thing that liberalism does, the kind of liberalism that we live under in the United Kingdom, is it obscures that political nature. It tells us that, for example, the state itself is purely neutral and that the education system is neutral and that the messages that are being delivered through the educational system are objective and neutral and, kind of without an agenda in mind, right? But there has to be an understanding that that is a fiction. That whole idea is a fiction because all institutions have a political character. And so there has to be a concerted effort and an unashamed effort to say, no, we're not going to do this kind of educational program where we present British history and British identity as being something neutral. We're going to say that it is positive. And we're going to say, like, yeah, that's a political opinion. But, it's also a political opinion to say that Britain is an evil country.
Hold on. This is important. Teaching children what you accept and admit are political opinions is also known as brainwashing.
Yes, but it's what our education system does right now.
So we should brainwash our children in schools to love their country more.
I mean, you're using the word brainwashing again. I think that's pretty extreme language.
But no, I'm not. I'm only using that. Let me just explain, because you say we should be teaching children opinions, and I'm saying we should be teaching children facts.
Oh, yes, but is it a fact to say that Britain is an evil country and that we should be ashamed of our history and that national pride is something dangerous? I don't think that's a fact. I think that's an opinion. I would say to that actually national pride is something good. It's where nourishment and belonging are to be found, and that Britain, on balance, has been a wonderfully positive contributor to world history, more so really than any other nation, I would suggest. And so, as I say, the institution itself is political. So the idea that we're going to be teaching opinion is kind of it's inescapable. The choice is not whether we teach opinion, but which opinion we teach. And I would prefer an opinion that sets young people up for a good life, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, rather than leaving them out in the wilderness of modernity, driftless and without a sense of place and belonging, which is what our education system does now.
Interesting. Charlie, thanks for time this morning. Charlie Downs, 23-year-old political writer, commentator and strategist. Listening to that was Steve Howell, who's a former Deputy Director of Strategy and Communications for Jeremy Corbyn, author of the book Game Changer, that's based on Labour's 2017 campaign. Steve, very good morning to you. You heard, I think, most of what Charlie was saying there about young people being taught that this country is bad and has a really negative history. He says we need to teach young people to love their country a bit more. Has he got a point?
Well, not really, no. But I think there's two parts to this. One is something you mentioned in your introduction, which is the reality that young people face today in this country in terms of a very precarious existence, 0 hours contracts, lack of opportunity, tuition fees being so high that some people can't afford to go to university, not being able to get on the housing ladder and living in accommodation that's precarious itself because a landlord might evict them and so on. And that's the reality that has to change. And I think, excuse me, that's why Jeremy Corbyn struck a chord in 2017, because he was addressing that reality. And then the second part of what this discussion really is this more sort of esoteric thing about values and about what our national identity is and so on. And I would certainly not want to see us go back to the bad old days that I experienced. I'm an old man now, and it was 50 years ago when I was, well, more than 50 years ago, in fact, when I was at school. And some of the things I experienced in school, like I almost don't want to use the words, but I will do, because I think it's important people understand what it was actually like. But one of the reading books in my infant school was called Little Black Sambo. And I had a geography teacher who, when she was teaching us about Africa, called them banana republics.
But no, Steve, nobody's saying we should go back to
that was the reality of the kind of things that were said then.
And I don't think anyone reasonable is suggesting we go back to that. There is this idea.
I certainly hope not.
No, and I don't think they are. I don't think they are, to be fair. But there is this idea that sort of what you're saying slightly to one side, that young people are being taught that Britain has historically been a force for evil rather than a force for good. And that is giving them the impression that they live in a country that is sort of not something they should be proud of. And you can see why that might have an impact on young people's morale. Do you accept it's true?
Well, I'm not a teacher, and I'm not close to what's being taught in schools, so I can't give you a very clear answer to that, except to say that I think it's a healthy thing that we're looking at our history, revisiting our history, if you like, and looking at the facts and prepared to actually turn over some of the stones and say, well, actually, this wasn't so good. How we treated people in Kenya in the 1950s was pretty damn awful. How we treated people at times in India was pretty bad, and be a bit more critical about it. Now, it has to be fact-based. It has to be designed to explore the truth of what happened, but glorifying people like Churchill in a very one-sided way, I don't think is the way in which we should. I mean, I am a bit of a historian myself. In fact, I'm writing a history book at the moment about American colonialism in Puerto Rico, which I'm hoping to have published next year. And the same thing is happening in relation to that, about the fact that the United States has this colony that it's had since 1898, that it conquered, and it is still a colonial relationship. And that is a matter of fact. It's a matter of law. And so to ignore that and pretend that the US isn't a colonial power is ahistorical.
Steve, appreciate your time. And there's a fair point in that. Young people are surely able enough to be taught, and competent and smart enough to be taught both sides of an argument. Yes, British Empire did a lot of good things, and yes, Britain's empire did an awful lot of bad things. Yes, we helped end the slave trade. We also sustained it for many centuries. Steve, thank you. That was former Deputy Director of Strategy and Communications for Jeremy Corbyn in 2017 and author of the book Game Changer, based on that campaign.